Thank you so much for the ones that are staying for our second panel. We'll be speaking about inclusion, having a voice in society. Actually, I'm pretty glad that we are continuing the speech and the conversation that we had in the first panel. I have here with me today 3 amazing speakers and 3 very different entrepreneurs. And we all got to see what they have in common with this conversation. We talked about it a lot in the previous panel about nature and it's how our natural systems live and how we as a community should be more focused on learning from nature. We talked about a lot on power and on values. So I think we will be having a very interesting conversation right now and continue what we started in the first panel. It's all about re-educating our minds and also our behavior and assume that in order to survive and to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind, maybe we need to define or redefine what purpose really means to each one of us. I'm the sustainability manager of Grupo Ageas Portugal. I've been working in sustainability for quite some time now. I will present you to my speakers. So on that side, I hope I will say your name right, Judith Volker.
Yes, very good.
Okay. Creator and founder of Magic Places, a new concept of hospitality inspired by ideals, but designed for a tangible and positive impact. Magical Places is a new hotel business model, me to we, puts people, territorial development, the environment, integration, and knowledge at the center.
Thank you.
On the right side of Judith, I have Langwallner. Good? Good. CEO and co-founder of WhatIF Foods. He brings fair and inclusive business strategies, sciences, and remarkable people together, inspired to create nutritious products for a profoundly healthier planet, humanity, and economy. WhatIF Foods is a planet-positive food and beverage company that is on a mission to regenerate the planet and its people. On my side, on my left side, I have Rebecca Saltman, founder and co-author of Empath, speaker with strong empathy for the earth and visionary of change. Your goal is to help create a world that is distributed equitably and where all women are seen, heard, and believed. I really liked your last phrase. I will start with an introductory question to all of you, just to make sure that the audience has the opportunity to know a little bit better your work. And my first provocative question is for you, Judith, because we are not very much used to linking the concept of luxurious hospitality with community engagements and also with regeneration. So how do you combine those concepts with magical places?
Yeah, should I introduce a bit about Magical Places
Sure.
first? Okay, Magical Places is a concept, is using hospitality to make a change in a region and also as a new business model. And I say business model because it's a holistic, it's more than a business model, it's a holistic approach about adding value and being sustainable in social and environmental and economic sense. So it's really regenerative tourism we're talking about. And my Magical Places is in focus on luxury, but now we can redefine also luxury. What is luxury for us? We are now used to a certain standard in the hotel industry, so the categories, what you find in your rooms and what the facilities are not so a big difference anymore between 3, 4, 5 stars, 5 superior. And that is also a thing where people not really are looking for. So it's more about now service. Service is the extra, and service is what people can bring. So, and having this extra experience, that is the luxury from the future, which finding things which you don't get anywhere else. That is one part, and that is also the transformative experience you can give to your guest. And the other part is also when you're choosing for a certain design of your hotel, you can look into the local environment. What kind of materials do I have? How can I integrate the local and the local color into the design for creating that extra experience? So there are two parts, which is very nice also. It is a challenge, but that is the whole Magical Places concept, to questioning every step in different fields. Like if it's concerning the place you like to start, is it the place in the sense of the nature which is there, the local people, what can you do with farming? Is it about staff? Is it about the ownership, the facilities you like to create? So all the aspects is re-questioning and what is there and what is not having negative impact on the area, but the other way around, what is adding value.
Yeah, very interesting. We will get back to that in a few minutes. Christoph, WhatIF Foods is all about reimagining the food production system. Your work is very much related with agrobiodiversity, soil restoration, and also nutrition. But what trigger your work is about trying to solve social problems. I heard a few things about your path. So can you share a bit on the reasons why you funded WhatIF Foods?
Well, I guess WhatIF Foods, and by the way, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being awake and listening to us. I know it's afternoon. We should all have a coffee, an espresso of sorts. But thank you very much for being here. WhatIF Foods is an organization that really got inspired by working with some of the most incredible people that I have had the pleasure to cross paths with, including my grandfather. My grandfather, essentially north of Salzburg, 20 kilometers, was the Netflix of his days. He was responsible for a family farm with dairy cows, with a butchery, and a huge restaurant. And the community did come to him, not only to have a beer or two, those in between my grandfather never counted, just the first one and the last one. Jokes aside, the community came to him as well to essentially look into the next story that my grandfather was actually telling them. Some of the stories he shared were planted, were not true, fake news. The others were true, and in that way he engaged very deeply with the community. My grandfather was a father of 7 children, and trust me, he did not know their birthday. But he knew holidays in the village. He knew anniversaries in the village. And because he needed to make sure that his supply chain works, so that he has enough sausages, meat, produce for the community on the weekend. And that's how I grew up, really. And if you contrast that and compare and contrast that to the modern food and agricultural industry that is totally disconnected from those people who are out there on the fields, either sitting on tractors and sweat, or literally have their hands dirty in the soils of mostly degrading land. And the consumers on the other extreme, they don't know each other anymore. They have no context. Some of the children are growing up thinking the milk comes from the fridge. And there's no such thing than a happy cow in the industry setting. It's an illusion that has been built. And I guess I, over the last 25 years or so, really got frustrated by the way of that business conduct, because I'm of the firm belief there is a much better way of doing it. Today we are living in an abundance of technology whereby artificial intelligence as well as other blockchain things can actually help us connect and reconnect to communities. But we are not an inventor of IT solutions. We are essentially going down on the grounds with our desire to grow forgotten crops on land that is being left behind by the existing system, reconnecting with the communities, giving them a voice by directly working with them, not once dropping something off and then seeing them post-harvest, being with them continuously, literally every week, throughout nurturing the soil as well as the crops. And then harvesting together with these communities, and then the real fun begins, because that is actually, from our work, that's the easy part. The difficult part is to create the markets for these forgotten crops. If I tell you that our hero is a legume called Bambara groundnut, by a show of hands, how many of you know the Bambara groundnut? I know that Scott and Peter do, and Sabine do. I know they do. But this is the typical scene. Nobody knows about the Bambara groundnut because it is literally forgotten by the system. It's an amazing, amazing, complete crop that feeds particularly families of smallholder farming communities and women in West Africa, naturally, because it has 20 to 25% protein, it has 7% of oils, all the essential amino acids, and these communities can actually feed themselves if they run out of cash for months on end. That crop is fantastic, but we don't know of it. And when I said that their hard work really starts on our end to create the market for these amazing crops that we have forgotten, then it is exactly the calling of my colleagues and I to go out there every day and do what we do in order to live up to our definition of regeneration, and that is that we need to go out to restore the degraded land that is being left behind from existing agricultural systems. It is one that reconnects us directly with the farming community. We are happy to engage with them. We are happy to have our face with them in the community. We are happy to know the names of the community members and their children, and at times play soccer with them. And the third pillar on which we are basing regeneration on is actually redesigning food for what is meant to be, and that is nourishing us, rather than just delivering us with empty calories that drive people within one generation into obesity. And that is the calling of ours. We call it internally our lust for life that we would like to share with everybody that is out there in order to regenerate for today's youth and future generations. And that is what WhatIF Food is all about.
Amazing. Passing on to you. Thank you so much, Christoph. Passing on to you, because I was hearing to Christoph and thinking a lot about disruption. It seems to me that they are doing a lot of disruption with their work. So, and you have a concept of disruption for good,
yes,
right?
I do.
So what does it mean to you to be a disruptor for good? Can you share a little bit and elaborate on that?
I first want to say thank you again to everybody for being here and being awake, and I want to be grateful to be amongst such geniuses, so thank you for that. So Disrupt for Good is basically a concept that I have been disruptive to all kinds of systems for my whole life. My mother always wanted to, poor mother, wanted to have always define me, to give me, like, put me in some sort of title.
Labels.
Something, so she could be proud of me and tell people what I did. And so one day I was able to tell her, you know what, Mom, you can call me a social entrepreneur. She was so excited. She was thrilled. And she was coming out to visit me. I live in Denver, Colorado. She was coming out to visit me, and she sat next to people and befriended them like none other. And she says to the woman next to her asks, "What are you doing? Are you traveling for business or pleasure?" "Well, pleasure." "What are you doing?" "I'm visiting my daughter." "What does she do for work?" "She's a social entrepreneur." Does that mean she runs a dating service? The joy of that is that I'm a bit of a weaver too, so I'm able to weave people, places, and things, and that's also disruptive, right? And the idea of disruption is not for disruption's sake, but to truly disrupt for good. There's so many opportunities for us to, they talk about the concept of disruptive innovation for social change. And that's been a concept out there for some time. And really what that is just turning the dial just like a degree or two to start to look at things at a broader place. And my co-panelists here are geniuses at that, so I'm really excited about this conversation.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca. Well, it's not very different from what Scott was saying. So being a mediator, maybe we can put a dating service on the mediator job profile. Maybe it can be interesting to explain that. Back to you, Judith. What do you believe are the most critical changes that we need to make to assure regenerative action? And by regenerative, I'm thinking about nature, but also and our impact on nature, the negative impact that we're having, but also on social topics and community engagement.
Well, actually, you said it yourself already, and I find that point one, and which I'm hearing also these days, which is very good, starting to act. And so actions, don't wait anymore. And one of the most important things to get things done is listening, what are the needs, listening what is really good, what is really adding value. And also another thing is lifting boundaries, that we have much more in common as we think, and also seeing more solutions as we think there are, so leaving a bit behind the old systems and the system thinking and making new paths of finding really good solution for that we can live longer on this planet in the end. But the lifting boundaries is not only as a company or organization, it's also in yourself, stepping over it and seeing what is possible. I think that is very powerful.
Very good. Christoph, would you like to elaborate a bit on that?
The biggest challenge?
Yeah?
The biggest challenge, I guess, from our work is to kind of break through the moment of truth. And that is when a consumer stands in front of a shelf or scrolls over the social media feed and sees WhatIF foods and a bum nut milk or a bum nut noodles and make people stop there and think. Because it is unbelievable how much power the consumer has with every decision a consumer makes. And it is very, very difficult to really breaking through that huge amount of consolidation that has taken place in our industry, because they don't like disruption. They may like our story, but they don't like our disruption per se. And you know, I was sharing, and probably you hear it from my voice, the passion and the ease I speak of the work that we do in Ghana and West Africa, and working with the communities, working with the partnering farmers that are joyfully growing the Bambara groundnut towards every better specification that make it easier for us to convert that into very nourishing foods. That's the easy part, actually. The difficult part is to make us as consumers pause and stop and say, if I buy this, I have a ripple effect. I knock a ripple effect and I can do actually good, rather than falling back into our standard behavior saying, oh, this costs this much, that costs that much, there's a promotion over here. Stop here and think about the impact our decisions make. And I think that, to me, is really, really the most incredible, difficult journey. Because forget those days where we had 30 seconds of a television advertisement out there. Today we are talking less than a second of attention time from people. And how can you explain a complex value chain that we are creating with all the impact that we're doing, right from consumers down to the communities that actually grow our food? How can we impact that message? How can we get it across in less than a second? That's the biggest challenge.
Okay, thank you so much. So behavior changes. We're going to talk a lot about behavior change today. But I really want to ask you about a different question on a challenge that you have already with expanding your business also. We were talking yesterday about expanding your business to Europe and the troubles
you ask a disruptive question.
of the system.
So folks, we are working in Asia. I started the organization in Singapore. We launched in Singapore during the pandemic. We are in several different markets. New Zealand has welcomed us. Australia has welcomed us. And since about May, June, we have a small but very fast growing presence in the United States. We are sitting here in Portugal, one of the most profound partners of the European Union. And EFSA has put, EFSA is the European Food Safety Association. They have put a roadblock in front of us because the Bambara groundnut as a raw material is not considered to be a traditional food, because at some stage somebody made a cutoff date of December 1998 or something, and everything that comes thereafter is considered to be a novel food. Hey, we don't touch any GMO. We are as organic as it can be. The Bambara groundnut is around for thousands of years, but the regulatory approval hurdles cause a huge delay in taking a product like ours to the market, despite partnering distributors in Europe reaching out to us and say, hey, whenever you guys are ready, we would like to have you. We would like to carry your brand with pride into the retail segment, but we can't get going. So the frustration here is that we all know there's a huge need to come back with biodiversity, protect biodiversity in natural ecosystems, and you can do that more effectively if you actually have agrobiodiversity coming back in. And then there's a company like WhatIF Foods that actually lives up to that promise, brings a forgotten crop back into existence, and then you're blocked on the shores of the European Union, and that's super, super frustrating.
You're not in the system, so we don't have a process for you, so you need to...
We are not in the system.
Yeah. Picking up on what Christophe was saying about being disruptive and not being in the system, do you have one biggest challenge of the work that you are doing that you wanted to share with us?
Well, I'm going to do 1.5. I'm going to take off from Christophe and talk about attention, that our most important currency of our era is time and attention, right? And so we put money as our first important currency, and then we say money equals time, and it devalues our time and our attention, right? So one of our biggest challenges is that money is the thing, and we have forgotten the other two pieces. So thank you for that lead-in. And then the other thing that is most important, I think, in my work is that we have lost our curiosity. As a generation, we've forgotten how to ask questions. We should be these little kids that are like, when are we getting there? And what are we doing? And we've lost all of that. And so in my work, my most important thing is to ask questions before coming to any conclusions or judgments or answers, just to ask questions and listen. I taught social entrepreneurship for about a decade at the undergraduate and graduate level in college. And we had 5 questions that every time, every class period, we would ask of all the students, and they could pick one of the questions that they would describe what we were discussing, right? And so the first question is what you're doing innovative? The second is it disruptive? Because, this is my question. Is it unreasonable? Because we are not thinking unreasonably. Like, we want to be nice and fit in the box and be nice to people. Like, is it unreasonable? And unreasonable is not bad either. And then the last 2 questions is, how does it get any better? And what else is possible? And if we start asking these kind of open-ended questions, we really shift the opportunity to open up our horizons in ways that stop blockages and start to have us thinking in ways that create more collaboration, more community, more connection, and so forth. So that's what I would believe.
I really like your description. Let me think about a little bit more on inclusion also.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit on inclusion and making the real connection with that topic. Yeah. All around the world, we can collect examples of very bad planning and projects that did not turn out very well. Although there was a lot of investment, meaning money on those type of projects, but ultimately it lacked co-creation, that's what you're mentioning, and also lack of equity, and leaving a lot of people behind on the equation, even in the conversation. So I would like to ask you if you agree with that, and if you tell us a little bit on your experience on community engagement, Judith.
Yeah, I'm coming back a bit on my what I said before. It is going in dialogue with all the stakeholders you're having, and going from a much broader perspective as just making money. It is about doing a shift, it's about adding, so you have to include and listen to each other for coming with better solution. And it's so not so difficult. I have lived several years in Italy in a little village with, I think we were making down the average age in this little village, because most of them were 80 plus, and this is a situation which is also very recognizable here in Portugal. So young people are leaving these old historic villages because there's no directly work, and yeah, they like to live in new houses and near where the work is, cities, etc. And we were there and having a bed and breakfast and a restaurant and offering all kind of experiences. And you see how easy it is to involve the elderly people and making the contact, talking with also the community, and making as a real small activity a huge change in a small village where there is a bar and there is some vivity, and people are happy to see what is going on. You can keep up infrastructure, and so it is about the small things we should appreciate and doing, and we have much more in our power to do, as we think it's not only about the big projects. The small things will help a lot to bring something forward and also give ground to bigger projects.
Yeah, we are coming back to reciprocity and happiness again. What it means to be happy.
Yes.
What it means to be happy nowadays.
Yeah.
Christophe, I was thinking about and continuing the conversation about co-creation with communities when delivering a certain project or initiative, and investing other than charity. We had that conversation a little bit last night. Can you explain what you do? You work also with Scott, that we heard in the previous panel. So can you share a bit on what it really means for you to co-create and to listening to communities?
Yeah, I guess there are really two extreme polar dimensions to the community work that, as an organization and as a brand, we do. One is on the brand and WhatIF Foods and being out there and how we communicate our story to consumers. As I said earlier, this is a huge challenge because you have a very short attention time. Whereas if you go into a community in West Africa, they give you the time you need in order to explain yourself. So the work that we do with consumers is a very, very difficult one. You have to sharpen your pencil to really craft the copy right. And not only is Scott today here, but also Peter Wenström, who has been absolutely instrumental on that part. And I call both of these gentlemen the gurus behind WhatIF Foods, because they really know how to do it. On the other extreme, and I mentioned it casually before, is the engagement work with our partnering farming community. And I said that's the easy work. Why is it easy? because they are extremely hungry to be recognized for the partners they can be, rather than being seen as a charity case that is being donated some whatever project or even money, and then these people turn around and leave them again, and day after tomorrow they are worse off than they were yesterday. So these communities, particularly in West Africa, where Scott is active, and I know that he is very happy to go back day after tomorrow, back to the community and being with them again. These people have a tremendous amount of dignity in them. They are proud what they do. And the moment you're going into these communities and you start adopting their ancient wisdoms and rituals and the way they are listening to each other, it's amazing how much energy and gratefulness comes through with the work they do. In particular, if you engage with the women of the society. Believe it or not, we have first kind of evidence that if women grow the Bambara is super happy. It grows in huge bushels and it comes out like being super, super rich in produce. And we have literally the same household, husband and wife, next door neighbor fields. So they had the same weather, they had the same climatic conditions, they had the same, everything the same. But where the man was actually taking care of the field, the Bambara is unhappy and folded off his leaves and died off. And just like 10 meters on the other side of the road, there's a field where the wife is growing it, and she's just an absolutely amazing person touching it nicely, and Mother Nature pays back. And that is a sort of, if you walk through these fields with these communities, listening to what the stories they have to say, it's just absolutely amazing how much we can learn from them. I feel so blessed to be able to do what I'm doing there with partners like the Pond Foundation and others. That's an absolute privilege. I just wish I could fly each and every single consumer into that community to see and touch it and feel it and experience it and get their hands dirty for them to actually realize how much power they have if they make the right choices.
Okay, thank you so much. I really want to ask you a question about your work with women.
Okay.
after seeing your bio, actually, and picking up on what Christoph was mentioning, do you have other examples where it's very, very easy to understand why investing in women is very critical in our society nowadays?
Where do I want to start? Well, I'll tell what might have become an urban legend at this point. I was told of an experience that there were these very well-meaning missionaries that went to a place in Africa. And they, without asking any questions, observed the women walking for miles with water on their heads to go to a water source and get back. And without asking any questions, they decided to go to the work of building wells and a water system for the community. Now, in general, well-meaning, maybe this was a good idea, but they didn't ask the elders, they didn't ask the women, they didn't ask anybody. And so they went about the business, they created all the things, they gave each other high fives, they taught the community how to use it. They went back to the States, they wrote up their white papers, and 6 months later, they came back, and the water system had been entirely destroyed. Well, you might ask yourself, what happened? Well, they didn't ask any questions. They certainly didn't ask the women. And the culture of the community was such that the women walked away from the men. Their social infrastructure was them talking to one another. And it was part of their culture to go and gather the water together. So it would have been so much more part of their culture to have considered, like maybe having backpacks for the women that carried the water, wheelbarrows for the women, many different innovations that would have been really extraordinary and have helped them carry the water and not given them scoliosis or terrible neck and back pain. But they didn't ask the question. And also, the other piece was that they were underfoot for the men. and the men started abusing the women. And so the women destroyed the system. So, you know, if we ask questions, I'm just going back to, like, if we start asking questions and start listening to culture, how much better is it? Now, I've worked with women in many different ways. I am especially fond of, I am honored to be a Shakti Fellow. It's, the fellowship came out of conscious capitalism. There's 51 women fellows around the world that are working on social impact and women's impact in the world. Sadly, on March 8th, 2020, I launched an international virtual trade show to weave the women of the world together, to create a world of reciprocity for women online. And we all know what happened on March 9th, 2020. So sadly, I had to close that down because the most important women in my infrastructure, in my ecosystem, were women in Guatemala and Africa and India, places that they couldn't commune to be together to share internet, like that ended. And so it wasn't important for me to connect wealthy, white, European women, around the world. To create reciprocity, it was really to weave the women of the world together to get indigenous wisdom and so forth to create a more holistic society where women's voices were uplifted.
Really liked your explanation. Judith, getting back to you, because I was thinking about go back a little bit on what the communities have to offer and to what we can learn from them. We have a lot of people from companies over here. So what would you think that companies have to learn from these communities and what they can do? Because listening is the first part of it, for sure.
The most important. What can companies learn from communities? Yes, I think it's a very important thing is to redefine for themselves the word profit. And that, profit, the community, communities are having the happiness, what you're sharing, they're sharing values, growing with each other. So that are not measurable things, and then you cannot put that in money. So profit is, actually there was a nice sentence, money is a side product from an ongoing flow of value creation. So that I find it's saying everything. So money is a side product of an ongoing flow of adding creation. Value creation. And I think companies should be aware of that, and that is what you can learn from communities, where it's not only about money and getting out of it, it is what you can create together.
Okay. Christophe, do you agree that values are one of the most important parts of the things that communities can share with companies?
I think before a relationship can be built based on values, today's corporate offices have to have the guts to actually get down from the ivory towers, get in a car, get to the community and be with them, and don't be shy to get your hands dirty and engage with them. It's a little story. Actually, this is not a West Africa story. It's actually a story in Australia where a colleague of mine and I had to bring bad news to a farming community, and we were invited to a shed, where essentially a stable, a shed of one of these farmers, where the others have gathered together to receive us. And as I walk into that shed, there was a noose hanging down from the roof. A noose, you know, where you strangulate people. And there was one here and another one was over there, so two. And it was my colleague and I who walked into the shed. And these farmers, these boys knew we were bringing bad news. And I never feared for my life, of course I didn't. But I couldn't hold myself back of asking, is this meant to be for me and my colleague? And I got the most remarkable answer back by Greg is his name, telling me, no, Chris, we honor that you are here because you are one of the first CEOs we have ever seen coming out to our fields. We would love to be in touch with you. We know that you're going to tell us bad news, but we would like to be in touch with you because we honestly believe that you mean it for good. And that was a game changer for me. And that is exactly, if we talk about values, we have to be there. We have to, I don't believe that you can establish a relationship based on whatever values you define unless and until you feel the human chemistry. And it's damn difficult to feel a human chemistry between people over a Zoom call or a Teams call. You need to have that human-to-human connection. As Peter Wenstrom said to me when I met him first time after the pandemic, he said to me, whispering in my ear after over a hug, saying, I love to smell a human. And I was thinking for a moment, my God, am I thinking so badly? But it was actually mean. And that is the reality. From there onwards, you connect to people. And if you dare to let your arms down and be open and be transparent and let them tell you who they are and you tell them who you are and where you come from, if it's meant to be from an honest place, down here and not up here intellectually, but feel it from your heart and your gut feel, then from there you can pick up a relationship and be walking any value that you can create.
That's very inspiring. Thank you so much, Chris. And talking about values and legacy, picking up that topic for you, I know that you like it very much. But I have the same question for you. Is values and legacy one of the things that companies should focus right now? Should be the focus of our current society?
Yes, let's just say yes. That we have to look at how value flows, and sort of the best work of my life is what I'm doing now in a company called Value Flow, and we're looking at legacy life, like leading a life of legacy, and what is the legacy you leave. And so if you're looking at your values, or you're looking at the community's values, and the legacy that the community is leaving, that companies could take a page from that. If they would actually take a look at, often they don't look at the legacy they're leaving. It's about profit. It's about, it's looking at all kinds of capital. Like, if we're looking at all the different kinds of capital, maybe we'll get to better values, and then we can look at the legacy that we're leaving. And if we're leading this life of legacy, we will certainly, everybody's going to leave a legacy. It's whether it's good or bad.
Thank you so much. I was listening to you and thinking about, well, you're pretty amazing right now, and you have a pretty awesome path and a lot of stories to tell. But I was thinking, do you remember a specific experience where you wished you did something differently? Because entrepreneurship, it's also about making a lot of mistakes, and making a lot of mistakes while you're doing business, but also in relationships and learning about those connections and relationships with different people that don't think alike sometimes. Judith, I'm coming back to you again. What do you remember such experience, and what would you have changed today, looking back?
Was it a mistake? It could have saved time, money, and annoyance. There was a project, I had 4 investors, and I started in the project, and I didn't know how the relation is between the different persons, and how much they talked with each other about the project. So I tried to find out, and they seemed quite well to know what they want. But still, I was thinking, okay, we have a kind of a showcase which we can visit to have an idea, an experience, and exchange. And it was like, oh my God, no, this is not a good idea, and we don't need it. We know what we want. And I was like, yeah, okay, you know what you want. So after 1.5 years, they found out that they didn't have the same idea of the project. They could not agree on one result, and I was in the meantime offering all kind of options and ideas and designs and whatever we could do with the concepts for the whole thing. So now the project has been cancelled, and that is a bit a pity, because I was not having the courage to say, yes, we have to go there. And it was my intuition who's saying, you have to do it. And I didn't listen to my intuition enough. And now I would change that. I'm really facing it, saying, yes, we have to go there. It will save you all a lot of money and time and, not so good energy to avoid any disappointments also in the future. So it's listening to the intuition.
Yeah,
and
maybe we can put that also in the job profile of the mediator. So listening to your intuition.
I say yes to
Chris,
that.
what about you? Do you have an experience that you would like to share?
In 2006, I took my family and I started a business in India. We had very little capital, so we got going, we got started. 2 young kids. My wife is an Austrian, so 2 white kids in India. Pretty soon in 2006, I understood that, okay, I can't make this work alone, I need partnerships. So I entered into a joint venture with a company that is the world's largest spice extraction company and essential oil manufacturer. So I happened to sit on a table signing the joint venture agreement, a paper, and I've signed it with the founder of that organization, a gentleman called C.V. Jacob. And we stand up and we do the photo ops, and he turns to me. He wasn't well spoken in English, but he turns to me and he says, Chris, I'm going to treat you like my own son from the day on. And I was a bit stunned when I heard him say that. Fast forward, I was young, certainly younger than I am today, but I was too young, I was not experienced enough, and I didn't understand the gravitas of that sentence in the context from where he was actually inviting me to be treated like his own son. In the meantime, he passed away during the pandemic, and in 2012, I've sold the organization because I was running into shareholder disputes, not with my joint venture partner, not with him. And I wish I would have listened much more to him, because in the community he was building his business in, he took thousands of people from below the poverty line into owning a house and a car. He took thousands of farmers into a network of supplying spices to him. He was the biggest bargaining gentleman out there. He was bargaining over a kilo of cardamom cloves. He was known for it, but he was doing it because the community needed it. They needed to celebrate his wins and losses. He was building hospitals and schools, and he never paid bonuses to his staff. He always asked them, do you want to build a house? I can convert the bonus into you repaying me the loan for your house. And in that way, he created an amazing, inclusive society around the business that he was building, to that extent that the community was so proud to work for him that they went the extra mile. So my biggest regret, I was too young, I was not experienced enough to sit down with him and try to find that interface with him, to listen and to feel him downloading the stories that he had to share. If I can rewind back, maybe there is a day where I'm CMing again. I'm going to find that interface and I will download all this knowledge that this man has.
Amazing. So we were talking a lot about listening, connecting, co-creating. Last question for you, it's the same. So is there something that you would regret not doing, and what would you have changed today?
So there's a lot of those. But to protect the innocent and the guilty, I will say, I was working in a small community in southern Colorado, building what was called Ubuntu contributionism. We were building a world without money, really. And amazing people were there and were really interested in it. And then the community members were skeptical, you know, and we won them over for the most part. But we were, what I realized in hindsight that I learned is that you have to ask the questions, right? So we were asking the questions, but we weren't asking the questions who we were asking the questions of, and listening to their answers was the challenge, right? So we were listening to, I'll put it pejoratively, the good old boys network, who claimed to be responsible and have the best interest of the community at heart, when we really should have been listening to the women and the entrepreneurs and the people that were actually doing the work on the ground. And it is a regret. And we did start working with them, but the project did not ever take off fully because we didn't start with them. And we really understand now, like, be careful and be conscious of who you are asking the questions of, and make sure that you're bringing the right people to the table. So.
Yeah, it recalls a lot about equity also.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. You've been very much amazing. I'm pretty honored to be here with you today, with all of you. I don't know if we can have a question from the audience, if you would like to ask any question. We will have a Q&A after the third panel, but not so sure. Okay, so thank you so much for coming, and thank all of you for being with us here today.
Thank you, Flávia.
Good.